Time for some business news now. I'm joined here by our business editor, Stephen Carroll. Good morning, Stephen.
Hi, Catherine.
And we're going to start off with the big event that was meant to be happening later on today. We've been building up to it for a long time, haven't we? The signing of this free trade deal between the European Union and Canada. Is it happening? Isn't it? It just seems to be completely up in the air.
Well, it seems at this stage that summit almost certainly won't happen today. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has cancelled his planned trip to Brussels. That was to see him sign the agreement known as CETA. So that means the deal won't be signed today, but there is still hope that it can be rescued. The signature has been held up by objections from Belgian regions, including Brussels and French-speaking Wallonia. Without their agreement, Belgium and thus the EU can't go ahead with the deal. Now, talks broke up last night without agreement, but sides are due to resume discussions today. Let's go to Brussels now for the latest and speak to our correspondent, Maeve McMahon, who joins us. Maeve, what's the latest that you're hearing on this? Are we close to a deal at all in Belgium?
We are. I mean, the political will is definitely there. Talks ended last night at 11 o'clock and they'll resume today at 10 in the morning. I haven't seen so much around-the-clock talks take place, or in fact so much tension between both the Flemish and the Wallonian politicians since back in 2011 when they were 589 days here without a government. So the political will is there. And Paul Magnette, the head of the Wallonian Parliament, has been clear since the outset that he never wanted to scupper this deal between the European Union and Canada. He said he'd voiced his concerns already a year ago, but only after the 14th of October, when his parliament rejected a resolution, was he listened to by the European Commission, he feels. And the Council, for their part this morning, they have confirmed that EU-Canada summit will not start today, but that Canada stands ready to sign that CETA agreement when the 28 are on board. For the moment, as Didier Reynders, the Foreign Minister, has said, now 27.6 are on board, and it seems like it could be in the next few hours or days if they're given that little bit more time. The Walloons and the Bruxellois will be on board with that too.
Do we know what the sticking points are for the Walloons at this stage?
Well, one of the major points was, of course, agriculture. They were afraid that they would have to be eating beef full of hormones. They were also worried about the investor-state dispute settlement, about how that would happen if Canadian companies would be suing European companies if they felt that due to norms and European standards they were losing out on profits and investment. According to Didier Reynders, who's kind of the face really of the negotiations last night, the text has been consolidated on these 2 points, but there's one remaining issue, it seems, for the Wallonians, and that is about the ratification of this text that would now go to all the parliaments all over the European Union. And that's after the EU summit. The idea was that then everyone would get another say to really rubber stamp that. It seems that they're getting a bit of pressure here from perhaps the Council and the Commission that they would rather that not happen and just that EU-Canada summit take place and then implementation.
Maeve, just very briefly as well, do you feel this is going to shift the EU position generally on how they do trade deals after these troubles?
Very possible, and in fact next April we'll hear from the European Court of Justice. There'll be a ruling out on the trade pact between the European Union on Singapore, on whether trade pacts should be an exclusive competence of the European Commission and the Council, and that parliaments wouldn't have the time or they wouldn't have the legal obligation to ratify them.
OK, we'll be watching that closely. Maeve McMahon in Brussels, thank you for that.
All right, indeed. A story that's going to probably be making the headlines once again later on. Right now, we're going to move on with a look at what's happening on the markets.
Shares generally trading down in Asia today. Markets taking a lead from the falls they had on Wall Street on Wednesday. Plenty of corporate news around for investors moving the markets today as well. Interestingly, in Japan, shares in Nintendo not showing any great reaction to a profit warning that we got from the company at the close of trading yesterday. They've revised down what they're expecting their earnings to be rather sharply, despite the success of Pokemon Go, which is, of course, an endeavour that Nintendo is very closely involved in. Just some gains on the Kospi and Seoul, up by 0.5%. Some more of the day's business headlines for you next. Operating profits at Samsung have slumped by 30% after the recall of the Galaxy Note 7. The figure of 5.2 trillion won, or around 4.2 million euros, is in line with a profit warning from the firm earlier this year. The South Korean electronics company stopped making the phone after reports of them catching fire. Troubled lender Deutsche Bank has managed to post a small profit in the 3 months to the end of September. It earned 278 million euros compared to an expected loss of almost 400 million. The bank's boss, John Crine, says that it's making progress on restructuring, but that it had been overshadowed by settlement talks with American authorities over the alleged mis-selling of mortgage-backed securities. And the carmaker Tesla has reported a surprise profit in the third quarter, the first in 3 years. Comes as the firm gears up for increased spending on the production of its first mass-market car, the Model 3. Tesla earned almost $22 million in the 3 months to the end of September. That compares to a loss of $230 million for the same period last year.
All right, we've got one final business news story from New York. It's one of the cities that's been trying to clamp down on people renting out their homes on Airbnb. It's actually just changed the rules for people trying to rent out apartments on Airbnb, and it sparked some protests.
Yes, in fact, protests on both sides of the divides. The rule change was signed into law by New York Governor on Friday. It allows for people that post rental advertisements for periods of less than 30 days to be fined up to $7,500. That means people in New York can only rent their homes short term if they're going to be present at the same time as their guests. Now, protests both in support and against this measure took place outside the governor's office on Wednesday. New York, just the latest city to crack down on Airbnb over fears that the rental site, very popular rental site, is driving full-time residents out of central locations in cities all around the world. Let's take a listen to what some of those protesters had to say.
My wife's a resident. She doesn't make much money being a resident. I have a startup company, and in order to afford to build our dream, I wanted to rent on Airbnb to help subsidize some of that cost. And with the passing of this new law, just listing my place makes it illegal, and I think that's completely wrong.
Because hotels have done it. They've been in it for many of years, and they have unions, they have benefits, they have all sorts of stuff. So we don't know if these people are going to do the same thing. Maybe they're just renting out apartments and then they're not paying proper wages to whoever comes and cleans them. Maybe they're not paying medical, maybe they're not paying anything.
A divisive issue indeed. Thanks very much, Stephen Carroll, our business editor here on France 24.